Welcome to Lifting the Line, a construction contracting podcast.
Welcome to Lifting the Line. We are a building and construction podcast, and we have Bedson here with us today, who is an OH&S expert in the field. I know, I don't know. Yeah, I know. No one's comfortable with the word expert, are they? Because then suddenly you're like, hang on, do I know exactly? Or so anyway. We think you're an expert, and we actually are just really happy to have you here today because we know that your experience in and your knowledge is going to be really good for our conversation. Andy, you're here from Brickies Network, and it's great to have you as well because you bring all your experience from your background, and this is where I get to smile. No, I've got experience in the industry as well, just from research from a trauma perspective, especially around psychosocial trauma and mentoring in the workplace and training and education. So, yeah, I think together we're going to probably uncover and discover some things. So where should we start? We've already been having some chats, haven't we? So where do you reckon you want to start off with? Andy, what do you think?
Oh, look, I think, well, because I always think construction, safety, OH&S, let's start with construction.
Yeah, good. Yeah, good place to start. Yeah, excellent. And construction site safety is a different kettle of fish. It's a challenging environment, dynamic, moving, mobilisation, demobilisation, business as usual. There's all different risks at that point of time. So construction site, I guess, for me, mostly is about communication with the people who are working on site so that everybody understands what everybody else is doing. And that's, I think, where some of our documentation is required. So we can look at site maps, mud maps, we can look at layout diagrams, we can look at safe work method statements, JSAs, and start to work out how the interactions are going to happen on a construction site. Because I say it's very dynamic, and you don't want someone building a scaffold over someone who's trying to dig a trench in the ground. That's where I see it.
Yeah, exactly right. And most of the guys that I speak to on residential construction sites, they're just like, oh, this OH&S stuff, oh, God, we've got to do this paperwork. But it is there for good reason because people don't communicate well when it comes to it.
Yeah, and I think for me, it's always that starter shift stuff, the toolbox discussions at the start of the day. What actions are we going to be doing? Who's going to work alongside other people? So I think that's an important, it gets the foot off the ground in the right way in the first thing of the day. So just getting people together to talk about the things that are going to happen without worrying too much about the paperwork stuff. Let's talk about the jobs that we're going to do today. And things like environmental impacts. Is it raining? Is it cold? Is there wind blowing? All those things can have an impact. So there's a certain process like safe work method statements. I've already mentioned those things. I mean, they're underpinned by the legislation here in Victoria. A construction site will have a requirement where it's high-risk construction to create a safe work method statement. But that's just one document. There's a whole lot of other things we need to be aware of as well. And we know paperwork doesn't protect people.
No, 100% doesn't protect people. It's there for a reason to show some documentation that you've actually thought about it. But it's actually the doing that actually is what helps people and saves people.
Yeah. And I think the other part of that, we have things like take fives or stop and things. So before we commence a job, thinking about the risks, the things that might be different. Yeah, okay, yesterday I sat down with a few people and developed our work method statement for the day. But what's changed since we created that? Has there been anything that happened overnight? Is there new things that we've got to consider? So that last minute, we call them a stop and think or a take five, just to think about the job. And I think if we plan it, and we turn up, we'll do a better job because we thought about the safety aspects. Do
you think it's also about allocating responsibility to somebody within the team?
Supervising. Or? We've got that requirement under the Section 22 of the Act to provide information, instruction, training and supervision is an important aspect.
Yeah, but it's also like that shared responsibility between all of us because
we're all adults, hopefully. We should all be responsible for our own safety and the safety of others, and we need to be aware of that as well. What actions are we going to take? Are we going to turn the water supply off for a period of time while we fit some valves and tap fittings in place? Well, what does that mean for the fire response or the amenities, using the toilets or washing your hands or having a drink of water? If I turn the water off, well, then we're going to have an impact on the site. So we need to have those open discussions between the various work faces, the interfaces between them, and who's going to have an impact upon someone else with the work they're about to perform.
Yeah, and that doesn't get thought about on smaller sites. It doesn't get thought about as much. But when you've got more people that are impacted from something that happens, then it has to be a thought.
Yeah, correct. Yeah. And we've got people with different needs, I suppose. People have got different ways of looking at this. So if we can get together calibration, that's where that supervision kicks in. Who can we speak to in your team that can talk on behalf of your team? Because we try and talk to everybody. We're probably not going to get the message through. We need a person who's their supervisor of that, a team leader, a foreman, whatever we want to call it, the common terminology, someone that can speak to that group and get their buy-in Because me as a safety consultant, professional on a construction site, I don't get that buy-in as much. I'm there to advise, consult, to assist. Sometimes be the fun police. That's always a difficult task to do, but sometimes I've got to call the work to a stop while we discuss what we're doing and what can be done differently.
Yep.
Yeah, do you think, I've had a couple of experiences with work safe and investigation, one particularly where my husband was on the site and it was a shutdown and an investigation into what went wrong, and that quite often I think safety and work safe and, that sort of thing is thought of when it's at its worst.
Yeah, correct.
But the whole point of being safe is to avoid all of that, isn't it really?
Yeah.
And prioritise the safety of the individual.
Proactive safety. So safety for me, I've been in the industry too long, and I guess what I saw in the early days was injury management only. It was sort of trying to deal with something once we'd hurt someone.
Avoid an accident.
Yeah, and pay them for we used to have a table of names that still exists to a certain extent under the workers' injury rehabilitation compensation legislation. But the table of names were paying people for cutting off the part of their anatomy or a hearing loss claim and those sort of things. And that's what it was about in the early days. There was no proactive safety. So it was all after the event occurred. How can we minimise the disruption of the business? How can we deal with the workers' compensation claim? How can we replace that missing person for a period of time? And I think that's changed. And I've had a reasonably long working career, but I think that's the big change, this proactive focus on safety. Auditing, inspections, discussions, communication, consultation. They weren't thought of in the early days. I go back to my very first part of my working career, we didn't use personal protective equipment. And I was working in a shed that was probably 110 dB. And no one wore hearing protection. This is in the late 70s. I only saw protective equipment in the early 80s. There was possibly pockets of it, but just not industry-wide.
Yeah.
And it was almost like a rite of passage, people walking out with a megaphone in their ear or a hearing loss, and they just get a compensation claim from that.
Yeah.
Which, we want to be proactive and prevent those claims. That's the aim of it.
Well, something I saw in my industry for the first time actually last week that I've never seen, being an educator in the classroom, educators lose their voices, and we want to look after our voice and our voice box, and you can have damage to your voice box over long wear and tear. And there was a new refurbishment in an RTO, and they had all the new mic system, all the speakers and lapel mics, everything was set up in every classroom, and I'd never seen that before. It was done in all the new refurbishment. Yeah. And that was great because in my first teaching, there was a teacher there who had lost her voice and she had to wear a microphone in the classroom for 3 months and she could only whisper. And it was deemed that it was too much wear and tear from being a teacher in the classroom.
Again, that rite of passage stuff, it's part of the job. Harden up, just do it.
Anyway, you.
I was just thinking, like, working on construction sites, there was always this focus on safety as in working at heights, or, you could fall down a trench and it's like instant injury. Instant injury that happens
injury,
there. Straight away. And that's what we focused on first. But now there's a lot more focus on those accumulated industries like, hearing loss, respiratory illnesses, all those sorts of things. What's been your take on that, or what you've noticed?
Yeah, I mean, the focus has always been on acute injuries. That's where the big ticket items were, people dying in workplaces. But those long latency diseases, it may not cause the death of a person, but their quality of life is diminished dramatically. And it may even be after the conclusion of their working career. In their 60s and 70s, dealing with lung issues. So we still don't give them as much focus as we need to, because it's sort of, you're off the books now. You're 67 years of age. You're no longer in the active workforce. You've got to put up with the quality of life that we've given you because of an exposure in the workplace. And we think about the modern ones, particularly, it's the big thing. It started with asbestos back in the 80s, 70s, 80s and 90s. We finally banned asbestos products in 93, but now it's Silica's the new one. But I've been in the cotton industry where cyanosis was a big thing. Black lung in the coal industry for people that suffered from that. Often they didn't die at work or died of a younger age, but they died prematurely or live with a chronic disease for the rest of their life.
It was interesting. I was talking to some people the other day that Ricky's, and they're like, "Oh, we've never met anyone that's had silicosis from crystalline silica or the dust that they breathe in or anything like that." I've gone, but how many guys do you know that were 65 or 70 that died of emphysema or they had a lung issue? Oh, I know heaps of them. Was it all the smoking, or was it
correct.
contributed to part of the other stuff? But now less people smoke.
Yep, that's another good thing.
They're now noticing, actually, people do have breathing issues.
Yeah. We talk about synergistic and antagonistic combinations of chemical factors. So pollutants, atmospheric pollutants, of which cigarette smoke is one.
Yep.
Nicotine has 19 carcinogens, they tell me. So you add a few more carcinogens to that, like silica or asbestos, and of course it's an accumulative effect and can multiply the effect. So deep drawing on cigarettes with a handful of lead dust or anything on your hands is not a good thing to be doing. So I think the banning of cigarette smoking in workplaces has definitely improved the situation. I can remember my first job was sitting in an office with people butting out cigarettes in an ashtray all day. And that was not just the nightclubs, but it was a workplace. I was a young guy in a workplace. My job was to go and buy the boss's cigarettes from the milk bar across the road. And he was smoking 50 Camel cigarettes a day, unfiltered Camel cigarettes. Yeah, right. I don't know if that guy's still alive, but I was only 18 at the time, so I assume he's no longer with us. But I say when you put those things together, they either antagonistically attack each other or they cumulatively affect you. So putting the 2 or 3 or 4 carcinogenic products together just can be dangerous. It's a recipe for disaster. Protecting your lungs is pretty important. Say emphysema, I had a neighbour that had that for 10 years and couldn't get to his letterbox without his oxygen cylinder each day, would stop halfway to his letterbox and then take a whiff of his oxygen and go back inside. And that's how he spent his last 10 years of his life. Yeah. He was in the boot industry, which is, again, another one that probably was not under the radar so much, but it was emphysema in his case. And he said it was the dust off the leather as he was sewing together boots. So, again, he suffered with a quality of life issue, but not necessarily a premature death, I suppose, or a death as a young person. But
and I think there's a bit of complacency about that because you don't feel the effects immediately. Correct. I really noticed that with brickies though. And I remember myself, we used to be cutting out mortar joints or we'd be cutting bricks and there'd be dust going everywhere and your nose would dry out and even sometimes it would bleed. There was that much stuff. You'd be sucking in that much stuff. You never had a mask on or anything like that. You just went, she'll be right. And I still watch guys doing it now. You'll see just dust all over their faces or they've just got a blade spinning in front of them like, mate, put on a respirator or something. Reduce it.
Yeah, and I mean, the mucous membrane's doing their thing. It's catching in your nose and your mouth and your throat. And you can spit it out and blow it out in your handkerchief and you see the crap on your handkerchief. At least it's not getting deep into your lungs, but a certain amount, of course, will be. So your mucous membranes will do their best that they can do, but it's ultimately not going to prevent it completely. So looking after your breathing zone is very, very important,
for sure.
And the corrosive nature of it too. It's your eyes that it gets into and it can cause grit and other things. It can have an impact where your quality of life is diminished.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, for sure.
So, I think when we met, Ray, we were in the classroom because you came in and were delivering a education session to people who were doing the traineeship. And it was clear there how young they were and, how much they had not had any experience yet. And yet all this experience that you were able to share, I think, was able to get them, thinking. So how much do you think about education being a really important and coming in early?
Yeah, I guess as my hair's going greyer, it's one of those things you want to pass the baton, pass the flame on to people and hopefully not let them learn from the experiences that I've had to put up with. One of the things I mentioned in that session, Elly, was in my first 12 months of my first job, 2 people died on that work site. And one of them was a pressure vessel explosion. That same situation could not occur today with the protection systems and interlocks and guarding systems we have in place, but we didn't have that back in the late 70s. And I still remember the supervisor of that department. He aged 10 years overnight. The next day I saw him, he was grey. He was ashen because he knew that the person under his watch had died in a workplace. The second one was just a bloke on the back of a deck of a truck, which was not unusual to stand on the decks of trucks. Got his heel caught on the gunnel rail, they call it, on the edge of the truck, flipped backwards. He had a hard hat on, but that fell off when he hit the ground. And then he died as a result of the injuries on the ground. So that's a pretty big baptism in your first 12 months when you're focusing on, I'm learning about working in a full-time job and these are dangerous jobs, and that's not the injuries we saw as well, a lot of injuries during that time. But those 2 fatalities stuck with me and I can still talk through those things, 50 years later or 47 years later. So I think, for the youth and the young people, they need to be aware of these things, not by exposing themselves to it, but learn about the mistakes of others, I suppose.
Because as you said, you've never forgotten about it and that sort of stuck with you. And, that's the other thing that's coming into the workplace too, is that vicarious trauma around seeing things, or even the accumulative trauma around being in an environment that you actually know is unsafe on a daily basis, and you're trying to speak up and you're trying to say something about it, but you can't actually affect any change or get any action to make it a safer workplace.
No. And dealing with people that keep saying, I've been doing this for 40 years, don't tell me how to do this thing safely.
Actually, being a young person and having a young voice in the workplace, I think is really challenging.
Yeah. Because they've got to deal with some of those entrenched behaviours, and the cultural issues of workplaces. So, and a good thing I've seen from apprentices and group training organisations are providing the equipment to the people, and they're trying to educate some of these old school boilermakers and people who've been doing it this way for 30 years. Not going to make much of an impact, but they're still having those conversations with these people, why it is important. And they've got a long life ahead of them. Those people that are still in their 18-year-olds to 20-year-olds, they've got a long working career ahead of them.
When I started working, the amount of guys I know that got a starter bar through their calf was incredible, because we were always on a job where there was Rio bars or starter bars sticking up out of concrete footings.
Yep,
now we have a little cap on them all the
top,
time. But we saw that happen all the time, so we were cautious around that.
Yeah.
And it's kind of that this is the way it's always been, and that happens a lot in bricklaying, that I think the guys this is the way it's always been, but they've seen the injuries that come with it. The new guys coming through, they're being quite complacent in what they're doing, and they've never seen what happens. So they're sort of like, they've never seen the outcome of it, so they're less cautious. We've got caps on, all that sort of stuff, but I'm still like, you land on one of them caps hard enough.
Yeah, correct. It'll cause a contusion injury, a bruise.
It'll still go through. I've seen them pop through the top of them.
It's not a perfect fix. It's not a perfect fix.
No, it's a measure in place, but but I think, the younger generation that are coming through, we have made all of these safety improvements. So they actually haven't seen the outcome to be even cautious doing something, so they're a little bit complacent.
And you don't want to give them the baptism by fire. You don't want them to be exposed to that sort of thing. And as Elly's saying, that post-traumatic stress of visually seeing something that's pretty horrific. I mean, it lives you with a long time as well,
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
I mean, something that's coming to my mind too is research and constantly learning is moral injury as well. I mean, I don't know if you've come across that being something that's relevant in your...
Well, unfortunately, we tend to use the law to punish people and not deal with the moral impact of some of their decision-making.
Yep.
So we punish them. I think about, maybe I've got away with this and I have not been, convicted through the courts, but morally I've got to live with that decision.
Yes.
And that's the important aspect, So, yes, I go in with a certain degree of caution, but I'd hate to have a decision that I've made, say, for instance, putting two different classes of chemicals together and having an explosion. And I knew those chemicals shouldn't have been mixed together. Yeah, maybe I could run a defensive due diligence and say, I'm sorry, I made a mistake. But morally, how am I going to think about that every day that I've exposed someone to that I knew I could have prevented?
Well, I heard a direct example of moral injury around COVID and around issuing fines in that COVID season that fundamentally was like questioning people at their core value of whether this was actually wrong and a reason to issue a fine. And this was a police officer that had come out of the police force with some impact of the work that person had been faced with. And so, and I think about children, and I think even some of the stuff we've had come through, all the information now around child safety, the moral injury that could be there with childcare workers, seeing and trying to speak up and saying something, and it's still nothing getting done. Like there's a lot to be covered, I suppose, when we talk about OH&S. You guys are talking about construction and machinery and materials, and I'm thinking about people and, duty of care and responsibility around
because, fines can be avoided. A fine, you can liquidate a company and have to pay the fine. And
a fine doesn't actually really solve the problem ultimately anyway, does it?
No. So I think that's not the punishment. And I'll say if you're a local council and you have one of your workers seriously injured or killed, well, if you put a fine against that council, do you know who pays the fine? the ratepayers. So to fine a council makes no sense. The council will not learn a lesson. Well, I'm sorry, they will learn a lesson from that.
Yep.
But the person who wears the punishment is the ratepayers of that particular council. So a lot of enforceable undertakings, they call them, for that sort of organisation. Otherwise, society's going to pay the fine, not the offender.
Yeah.
And I say, and companies have gone into liquidation to avoid some of these fines. The actual prosecutors themselves have reduced fines based on guilty plea or capacity to pay. All those things mean that fines are not the punishment. It's the moral punishment, I suppose, we've got to reflect on somehow. How do we hold that accountable? Yeah, and I'm sure workplace manslaughter will be one of these things where we will incarcerate someone who will be an officer of that organisation for the offence that's been occurred at that workplace, up to a term of 25 years.
Yeah.
Now, we haven't seen that yet, but I'm sure as time progresses, as we saw with reckless endangerment here in Victoria, we start to punish people. It takes a while to get that to happen, but we need to hold their accountability to an individual, not to a fine or a company level.
So I think one of the things I remember you saying in your training was about how accessible WorkSafe is for phone calls, for
probably
information.
The best represented regulator in Australia, above all the other states and territories. And we do have a good focus on proactive safety and advisory service. So I think they're a resource. We should tap into that resource. Sure, they're there to put the punishments in place and they're there to launch prosecutions and convictions, but for them it's not about the revenue raising, it's about raising awareness in safety. And I think the good thing with WorkSafe is that they're accessible now. In fact, walking here today, I saw an inspector out there on the Johnson Street before. I'm not too sure what the lady was up to, but she had a little clip pad there and a notebook, and she was, I guess, investigating a workplace, maybe a complaint, maybe a sexual harassment or a gender-based issue, violence issue. So they're out and about. We have a higher ratio of inspectors to workplaces in Victoria than any other state or territory.
I told that to a guy the other day. I said, there's more inspectors in Victoria than anywhere else. And he was like, nah, I've never seen them. Like, they're out there.
Correct.
They're out there.
And they do blitzes, they look at industry types, but they look at the workers' compensation claims and say these are areas we've got to focus on.
Yes.
Mobile cranes has been a big thing, tip over of cranes on building sites. So they focused on that area.
Yep.
So they've got these, themes that they work through, but also an anonymous phone call to WorkSafe will generate an activity. I've spoken to them on many occasions. They'll ask for my name, I'll give my name, but I don't have to. As long as I put in that complaint, I'm sure they will go through and investigate. So I think that's a good thing. The advisory firstly, but then they'll hit you with the hard stick if they need to. But at least have them in the conversation in the first instance.
Yeah.
Otherwise, you have a difficult time trying to convince them that you've done everything you could possibly do to provide a safe workplace.
Yeah. Talking about fines, I was talking to someone from one of the WorkSafe organisations, and I can't remember what state it was at the time. It could have been WorkSafe Victoria or Return to Work or iCare or someone. I can't remember who it was I was talking to. And I asked the question about, like, industries sort of have a percentage that we have to pay for certain industries. And in Victoria, I think bricklaying is like 7.95%, I think, is the work cover premium. But of course, if you've got someone that's been injured in your business, well, then your business is a higher risk, so you probably get a higher premium.
Rolling average of payment over a period of time,
Absolutely. And I asked the question, could workers' compensation be like your home insurance, where you get a discount if you actually put locks on your windows? If you actually can prove with toolbox talk registers and all of these processes in place, whether you've got an EAP in your business for psychosocial hazards and helping people with their mental health, if you can prove that you're providing all those services and your business is a safer workplace than the other one, could they give you a discount rather than just fining you more or giving you more premiums?
It'd be nice if that was the way it worked. Unfortunately, like any insurance scheme, it's got to be based on the costs of the previous 12 months plus the the profit that insurance company wishes to generate. So that's how they work the premiums out. But as you say, each industry type will have a different factor. And if you're the best performer in a bad sector, you don't get any benefit from that.
That's right. You're getting penalised.
You're tied together with the rest of the people in that sector.
And what I've noticed in construction, there's a huge amount of people that are on site that don't even have policies anyway. There's probably, I reckon it's probably 50% of guys on residential sites don't have a policy that covers them anyway for workers' compensation. And so that means that half of the people in the industry are paying for the other half that get injured anyway.
Yeah, correct. Yeah, I think so the unions refer to them as sham contractors.
Yep.
They'll come in with their own ABN and they'll have a what they call it, income protection insurance, but not workers' comp insurance.
Yeah.
So they don't feed into that pool anyway.
Yeah.
So where you've got people running their own business as a self-employed brickie or electrician or plumber, they may be sitting outside the workers' comp system anyway, so not paying into it. And if they're the worst offender, they're not going to be topping up that barrel of money that we need to provide workplace safety.
Exactly right. And I say this to bricklaying guys all the time. I go, those guys that aren't doing the right thing, they're contributing to your high premium you're whinging about.
Yeah.
But they don't realise that. They just think they're getting reamed. I said, well, it's not them reaming, it's because of the average.
Yeah, correct. Yeah.
Those guys that don't pay effectively mean you have to pay more.
Yeah.
And they're like, we didn't know.
And we have a scheme in Victoria, the Self-Insured Association, so you can actually reach the status of self-insurance if you wish to. But that's for big businesses. That's not for the small bloke. That's for the the Kraft Foods, the Crown Casino, Toyota Motor Company, Blue Scope Steel, One Steel. Those companies had the money to do that, had the financial wherewithal to sit in a self-insurance world. They don't sit in the workers' compensation insurance scheme.
Yeah.
So the best performers aren't even feeding into the pool either.
Yeah.
These are high-performing organisations that have got good safety track records.
Yeah.
But they don't feed back into the worst performers who are, milking the system, I suppose. And that's probably the claim of any insurance, I suppose, where an insurer, you'll have people that constantly claim in their insurance policies, their home insurance, their contents insurance, the loss of a pair of sunglasses or a ring or a travel insurance, the same thing. My suitcase got a dent in it, but I want a new suitcase. So those people are tapping into it constantly, and then the people who don't make any claims have to feed back into that system.
Yeah.
So it's insurance in general. I mean, the workers' comp system, probably because the cost of claims have blown out dramatically over the last 10 years. Yeah. We talked a little bit about mental health claim, but some of those costs are phenomenal. The cost for mental health injury is in the six figures and above now, whereas a physical injury, soft tissue injury is probably sitting well below that figure. And that's where the increase is, the number of claims we're having for mental health injuries, but also the reporting of those. Not just they're actually happening more, but people are reporting them more. Reporting is a good thing. We've just got to try and get it on the front foot so that we can then reduce the claims related to that. But it's not an easy thing to resolve. I've been working for 40 years in physical injuries, broken bones and lacerations, contusions and bruises and burns and stuff. They were easy. You get a medical practitioner to look at the healing of that injury. But in this area up here, I'm not sure how we're going to get a result to that. When is a person fit for resumption of work? What certificate of capacity can be provided to a person who's got a mental health injury? It's not as easy as it was with physical injuries to see the healing process.
No. But even to eliminate the hazards towards mental health injuries or what they call psychosocial hazards. Yeah, that's really hard, especially in some industries like, say, residential construction. I go back to it because that's where I've spent most of my working life. Like, we're tradies. There's a lot of bullying. There's a lot of niggling. There's a lot of...
Always has been, yeah.
There always
hazing
has been.
And all the stuff that we did,
Yeah.
And not acceptable today, but...
Not acceptable today.
No.
But even to say to those, well, this is the way we've always been, guys, well, actually, no, you've got to put measures in place to stop that. And you do have to reach out to your staff and say, hey, are you okay? Do you need to have a talk about something? Have you had a chat to the EAP? Have you had a chat to one of your colleagues if anything's going on? Because if you're not making anyone aware of it, we can't do anything about it.
Yeah, correct.
But there would be some they would have actually researched what are the contributors to mental health wear and tear in your industry, right? Do you know what that has been researched or discovered in the building and construction? Like what type of behaviours lead to a trauma, a psychosocial trauma?
Yeah, I mean, discrimination, bullying is probably the couple of big ones. Gendered violence, there's a whole lot of these things that have been, I guess, swept under the carpet or even accepted at a certain period of time, but are no longer acceptable on work sites. So we've got that sort of catch-up stuff. We've still got to get on top of a lot of this, and still some sites don't understand their obligations to look after their inexperienced or their, they're getting the gender balance right. I guess the other interesting statistic out of that, though, when we look at workers' compensation claims in perhaps that sector, we see a high, maybe a low amount of workers' comp claims, but a high amount of suicide rates in that same sector.
Yes.
Yeah.
So they're not putting in the claim necessarily, but they're dealing with the problem, the injury, in a different manner.
Yes.
So I think it's better that we report it. At least we get that on the table, and we can provide some, assistance programs, counselling services, etc. Rather than let them get to that dark place, which makes even worse an outcome. We don't see those in the workers' comp statistics, though.
Because it's such a predominantly male industry, then the statistics are very much about men and the risk of suicide. And I know, Andrew, that's something you've been really passionate about, haven't you?
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. So, I lost a worker. I never saw it coming. He'd only worked for me for a short period of time, but there was other things going on in his life.
Yeah.
There was other
There's cumulative effects.
Absolutely.
It's not just one thing in a workplace. It's a whole of life thing.
No, exactly right.
Just one trigger in a workplace that might bring it out.
Well, this is it. That's the thing. And I've worked with many, many guys that have taken their own life, and we're in an industry where there's a lot of ego. There's bravado. You don't necessarily talk about your feelings, but there's also a high drug and alcohol usage as well in the construction industry, which compounds it. It's a masking agent. Alcohol's an effective masking agent. Yep. It works perfectly. I say to people, mate, you found something to take away the pain. Good on you, but but it's not going to help in the long run.
No, correct.
Not at all. It's actually going to compound it, and that's it's super high. And so I'm really passionate about that for guys to be able to reach out and.
And it wasn't another thing that I didn't mention there in triggers for this is impairment, physical impairment in a workplace. Whether drug and alcohol or lack of sleep or disruptive patterns or trauma at home because of some domestic violence situation. All those things could be triggers to a mental health injury. So impairment's something we have to deal with. The fitness for someone to do their job and being aware of behaviour change, perhaps in a workplace when they're not perhaps themselves. Now, assistance program could assist, maybe a medical intervention. Can you go and see a GP and just have a chat to them because you're obviously not able to talk to me about this? It could be something that you're taking, imbibing in or having an effect on. Again, I'm having worked in drug and alcohol programs. The things we're scanning for are probably only 3 drug types, opiates, cannabinoids and pseudoephedrine-based drugs. But there's so many other drugs out there that are non-detectable. The youth of today are discovering these things. I go to music festivals as a safety officer, and I'm surprised about some of the things that they're finding to get themselves happy with or high with or whatever else it is, and those things aren't detectable. So impairment is not just about the 3 drugs that we've known traditionally. It's a whole lot of other stuff out there that could be affecting them.
But I think bringing the topic out into the air, obviously, and part of this podcast is doing that. And I highlighted the rate for men for suicide, but I've recently heard that the highest rate for women at risk of suicide is between 45 and 55.
Okay.
And that is due to menopause and the amount of change that happens for women at that point in time, and also changes in the workplace, changes with family. And when I've done the research around the trauma susceptibility, if you like, the susceptibility for psychosocial trauma in teaching and education, there's a lot that sort of is behind the scenes that puts you more at risk. And you're saying your industry puts, people at risk because of some of those things you were saying around ego or, alcohol and drugs and, not talking about your feelings. But I know for women, like alcoholism over the age of 40, the statistics are very, very high. And those things are just, getting those topics of conversations out where we're actually talking about what actually is really happening, I think is really, really important. You're thinking about something, Andy.
No.
Some sobering thoughts.
It really is sobering thoughts. I was trying to think,
I know, because we're talking about men in the industry, but I'm thinking, I'm sitting here female knowing exactly what the issues are for women as well.
I'll present an interesting statistic. This is published by WorkSafe Victoria, and they over a 10-year period, they analysed male deaths versus female deaths. There were 10 times more male deaths, acute deaths on site than there was female deaths. So something's going on there. I think I might have presented that at that training session, but over a 10-year period, there were approximately 20 odd women were killed, 220 males died in work sites. Yeah. Now, I know there's going to be sectors that are male-based or male-biased, but we're seeing a lot more integration of females into workplaces.
And that actually connects to something you've said, Andy, and I'm just trying to remember. We were talking about women take less risks
I think that's part of the answer,
And
absolutely.
men are typically more risk takers.
Yeah, we'll get away with it. We'll do it. Have a crack. Get up there. No scaffold not needed. Just hang off the side of that building. You'll be fine.
Men don't ask questions as much. They don't want to be seen as not having knowledge or smart or capable.
Yep.
Women are quite happy to ask more questions. There's some things certainly trait-wise around gender that are
I don't think the answer is totally the industry type that the gender mix is in. There has to be another reason to that. And I mean, that's, I don't do research in that sector, but it'd be an interesting part to have a look and find out, for those that are gender balanced, do they still see the same ratio of male death versus female death in those workplaces? I mean, we talk forestry, agricultural, mining. We don't have a lot of mining in Victoria, but they're probably the big ticket items where people die. Construction sitting up there too. I know we've got some gender not balances in those, but those that are gender balanced of that sector, do they see that same ratio happening? And I think there has to be a psychological reason why women take a more conservative approach to risk in a workplace compared to a male doing the same task. That's just raised belief in that, in my opinion. But I think there has to be some influence of the decision processes that we could learn from generally across all industry types.
Yeah.
So, I was in preparation for this, I was thinking about all the different types of risks and, safety around different things, and made me start to think about how much machinery is changing with automation.
Absolutely. Robotics and automation is a huge change in my working career.
Yeah, so there's no one behind the machine to see something that could potentially go wrong to stop it because it's on auto. It's been programmed.
And robots are non-forgiving. Robots don't forgive.
So what do you think that's going to do to industries, do you think, going forward?
Well, I think we've got to be really focused on, the verification and isolation of equipment any time that we're interacting with it is critical. We don't know when it's going to start up by itself or even misfire. So we need to be very cautious around robotics and automation. I mean, there's a lot of good things that have come out of that as well. We've seen a lot less manual handling injuries, a lot less soft tissue injuries because we've got robots doing the work that people used to do. But as I say, a driver of a forklift has the ability to brake pedal pretty quickly. A robot's not going to see the same sort of things. They've got presence sensing devices. They've got, interlocks and light curtains and all that other things. But we're relying on those working. And I'm not going to test to find out whether they work by interfering with them. So we need to have a very conservative approach. And they work at high speed as well. They don't seem to work at a slow space because they need to be doing things quickly.
Yeah.
But I still think it's a better thing than the systems we had in place years ago. Castellated and fortress locking systems on equipment were very, very primitive. In a lot of cases, we didn't guard equipment. It just wasn't guarded. If I go back to the discussion of the gentleman who died from the pressure vessel explosion, the machine was not guarded. It was not interlocked. He could not have done that today with the protection systems we'd have in place. But it's a bit like emergency stops, the same thing, those big red buttons. Hit them every so often just to make sure that the machinery does shut down.
That was another thing I remember you saying. Hey, have you actually tested the button just to see if it would stop? And I was like,
no.
Good idea. Great
every so
idea.
often, every few months, 6 months, I don't know, just put a cycle in your calendar to check to make sure that e-stops on all your robotic equipment work. You can't guarantee that they are going to work at that time. I worked in the food industry where a lot of the relays get full with liquid, water particularly. And, of course, electricity will just flow freely through water. Even though the relay's opening and closing, the water's just a conductor for the electricity. So the e-stop won't work in a saturated relay. But, they're supposed to be IP rated. Yeah, they're all those things. But they can go wrong, just not relying on them at all times, But again, I think it's a better place to be and where we've got less human error, less chance for human interaction. Has to be a better place for people to work. And then we've got the emerging technologies, like everyone, AI is a common thing they're talking about. This emerging technologies, there'll be people's jobs lost over this. But does AI have the ability to inform, instruct, train and supervise the same as a human will do?
Look, VR simulation and VR training is something that I've, been interested in as well. And I've got question marks as to whether that's actually
it's a brave new world. We've got to focus on it, but then realise that, for every new technology, there could be a new risk introduced and consequence could be increased. The consequence of the incident could be increased, not the frequency of it, but the fact that it'll kill someone, We've had palletising equipment kill people, automated palletising equipment here in Victoria. We've had 2 deaths that I know of and serious injuries as well. So it's when the robot swing arm hits a fixed column, but there's a person between those 2 interaction points. That's when we have problems,
Yeah, well, I met a company that did a lot of their inspections were underground for whether it was water or pipes or something like that. And what they did was in their application process, they had a VR simulation for people to go through that simulation of going underground, going through the tunnels, testing, being in that environment so that they could discover then if they were claustrophobic or could have panic, responses to being in enclosed spaces. And that was a way that I heard VR was being used. And I just thought, gee, that's a brilliant way, If it's simulating to train someone to use a piece of machinery and then the next thing they get given the actual piece of machinery without supervision because they've done the VR training, I've got question marks all over that. But the testing of an environment and an experience to prevent any panic scenarios, I thought that's brilliant. And again, it's a new...
Yeah, it's new technology. We've got to embrace it. I mean, drone technology is another thing, We don't have to do the working at heights at times. We don't have to use the elevator work platform to go up there because we've got a drone that can go up there and take the photographs we need and do all the elevations and the lines and stuff. So I think that's a huge opportunity. I had a gentleman a couple of weeks ago tell me he's building a drone that will carry 80 kilograms of load. So 80 kilograms. So it's no longer your little pizza arriving from the Domino's place.
No, that's right. Yeah.
It'll be carrying something like a water hose or something else that could be used. So, drones have taken away a lot of these height risks that we've had. We have a lot of deaths in falling from heights. Prevention of falls is a big thing.
Yeah, look, I think because I've researched drones as well, and the biggest industry that drones are having the most benefit is emergency and rescue.
Yeah.
Because drones are able to go into places and go heights and distances and ways of seeing things that...
Where we've used rope access and things like that before, there's now the ability to put the drone up there to do that work. Yeah.
And a cliff rescue, when you can't actually get over that cliff and see if anyone's actually down there and still alive, send a drone down and, we hear of all these really amazing stories of how...
Yeah, and I mean, another one's hydro-excavation, non-intrusive digging, whatever they use.
Hasn't that been amazing?
Yeah, we don't have to get the backhoe and bobcat out and dig some holes. We can use a hydro-excavator.
You don't have to get a person down in the pit either. Yeah. I've seen trenches collapse on guys because they haven't been shored up, but these not an issue. Doesn't need to be shored up until the hole.
Doesn't need to have a person in the hole.
It doesn't need to have a person in the hole, so it doesn't matter, and you can shore it up when someone has to get down there to actually do the work.
Yeah.
Well, before they do any of the logging and stuff that they do in the Otways, they send a drone out to see if there's any caves underneath before they send in those heavy, diggers and stuff to see because, there's all kinds of cavities that are under the ground that machines can fall into. But, you can actually scan and get those depth readings about what's underneath the surface before you send anyone in.
That's pretty incredible.
And it's happened in my working career, but in a very short period of time. So generally ban them because emerging technologies, of which AI is one, but there's a whole lot of other things out there that'll, not invented yet, but will be in the horizon at some stage.
So I found it so interesting when I went to Broken Hill, and I know I was talking to you about this, about how there's a memorial for all the miners at Broken Hill, and it's for everybody who has died in the mines. And when you go along the wall and you see the year that injuries occurred, and every time a new piece of machinery came out, you would have a string of incidents of injuries or deaths. And then you'd see these, and it's almost like you could see the story unfolding, through the improvements to that piece of machinery, but then another system would get brought in, and then there would be a string of, deaths and stuff. And I just remember, it was sobering to kind of walk along and see how much mining it affected the town and, families and workers and all that, the community. But, there was themes. And it made me think about what are our themes now. I mean, we're talking about, AI and drones and virtual reality and other, automation and programming. But, what do you think are our new, relevant, most recent challenges for change in our industry at the moment?
Yeah, well, I think if I think about plant and equipment, it's we were a big manufacturing location in Australia. Our manufacturing employment has dropped dramatically in my working career. So I don't think it's in that plant equipment sector. I think it's going to be in like the ability to replace humans with automation, robots that can do the work without the human failure issues. driverless rideshare, it's already happening overseas. I think that'll be a big opportunity for driverless vehicles.
Mm.
We're already using it in mines in Western Australia, and we've done a lot of trials even here in Victoria on heavy vehicles using driverless technology. I think that'll be the next thing that'll, robots will be taking over that part of the world. Again, for a good thing, because we just don't have that human decision-making process or the impairment we talked about before is not possible.
But there is that learning curve that
correct.
That puts it, so we have to, before we release something on the market to be used, you've got to make sure it's gone through all that rigorous testing.
But not embrace the change, though, I suppose. Deal with those risks as they're identified in the planning stage. We call it safety and design generally, trying to design out any errors or failure modes that could occur using the controls to prevent them from occurring when they, when things do go wrong. So it's that the human aspect is how close am I to that robot if it was to go wrong? And if it did go wrong, what was going to happen? Things like line of fire and projectiles and things that can come off. That's the sort of thing we've got to be concerned about. Because, as I say, we don't have that same decision process that we have with a human. They can intervene at a certain point of time. The robots will go on regardless. They can't perceive that, or yet. But I'm sure there'll be methods that we can use to try and make sure they're able to think of their own failure modes. But they're talking about AIs training other AI. I don't even know how that works. I like self-learning technology, though. I like the fact that, as you Google search, then your search engine will look at the things you like to do. I like the fact that vehicle tuning now is a lot easier because it learns your driving techniques and your fuel injection systems and your advanced curves and distributors will be doing different things. So self-learning is not a bad thing. It's just we've got to be careful about it copying too much, perhaps, of our human errors as well. But it's an early. I mean, for me, it's an early stage of it. But it's the new challenge going forward in the OH&S space. For the youth coming into this sector.
Yeah, I mean, and I'm at the training end of it where the training packages are not changing quick enough to meet the needs of the industry, and so the training packages actually is what dictates the training. However, those that are training for the industry know that they need to be training more, but it's not in the package to do it. And so, how quick can we keep up with everything that's happening? So that, I don't know. It's a big.
No one knows the answer to that one. That's the thing. No one knows the answer to that.
I think there's a lot of people who are working really hard behind the scenes to try and adapt and change and, get with what's necessary. Yeah.
Ray, it's been a fantastic conversation today. Thanks for coming in. If someone's wanting a OH&S safety consultant, where can they get in contact with you?
I mean, my business is RBSM Safety Management, so I'm the director of my own business. Word of mouth and LinkedIn is probably the best way to find me on my profile. So it's not hard to find. I've got a reasonable profile pic. I try to make it look reasonably tidy. But that's probably the best way to contact me. I'm not out there trying to secure work in any way. I'm reaching that stage in my life where training's important because I am trying to pass the baton on, the flame on to someone else, the torch, so that other people can run with it. As I say, through COVID, my business took a fair old hit. And as a safety consultant, there just wasn't that work available. And even in training, we did a little bit in the Zoom and the Teams platforms, but we didn't have those opportunities. So for me, it's like many people, it's what they call the Great Resignation is what they called it in America. A lot of us are choosing to do a little bit less than what we did prior to COVID.
Fair call.
But if we go back to the basics, bricklayers will never be made redundant by computers or AI. No. There's a process of laying bricks by hand.
That is actually a hallelujah moment. That is absolutely right. And I'm a big one for craft, human craft, handmade, hand constructed,
artisan type stuff. There'll be mass-produced homes for sure, but the artisan-produced stuff will still be in demand.
Well, I mean, we didn't talk about 3D printing houses, did we? But that is coming. But I tell you what, I don't like the look of them.
I don't think
they're a little bit rugged and ugly. So,
and the other discussion around working from home, as a bricklayer, you can't work from home. It's not possible to.
Not going to happen.
It's not going to happen. So
not going to happen.
I think that human part of the workforce will always be there, and with that, of course, there will always be safety risk as well.
Absolutely.
That's right.
Fantastic.
It's been great. Thank you for coming.
Thanks, Elly. Thanks, Andy. Been a good session.